Look at this average Centipawn loss here. It's 18. Yes, which is normal. It's not that low as well. I have had a game where it was 3 as well, which was a very fascinating game where I kept on attacking. Now, the difference here is that that was a blitz game, but this one is a bullet chess game for just 1 minute and no increment on the clock. So that's what makes it more special, having an average Centipawn this low in a bullet chess game. You heard that right. And let me take you through this game because it was an interesting game as well. Because my opponent starts off with b3. Now, whenever a b3 opening is played, which is the Nimzo Larsen attack as well, the threats are always eyeing towards your king side, with the bishop coming on to b2 eventually, and then making sure that development. If you want to play g7, g6, it's very bad. Bishop will be heading towards it. Even if you place the knight, you're always in troubles. And castling on the king side is very bad because, of course, the bishop is going to lie. So either you are very good with that defense, or you do the counterattack and castle on the queen side, and then push your pawns and do everything on the king side. So I started off with c6 here, which I generally do with black. I pre-move c6 and d5, because I think it's very safe to do so. There are no threats with any kind of an opening. That's what I have felt so far. So I played c6 d5. My opponent then goes with d3. Now generally opponent will go with d4, but not here because you are shutting down your own bishop, which is very vicious. So I went with bishop to g4, making sure the opponent feels difficult to push the pawn, and I am threatening to take the queen if the pawn is pushed. So opponent plays knight to d2, and opponent is already crumbling for space. I went with e6, solidifying my center now. The pyramid is nice in the center. My bishop is out of this light square pawn pyramid, so bishop is active as well. Queen goes to c1, and now queen going to c1 is just to make sure that the opponent can play pawn forward. Can be either of the two moves. Here I just pushed my bishop backwards onto h5 because, of course, I was playing bullet, so I am pre-moving too. My opponent plays e3. I went with knight to f6. Now there's no threats because I have played the knight. If the opponent does take with the bishop, I can always take back with the queen. My queen will also get active, and it's a nice position to be in. Opponent plays bishop to e2. And in this position, I just get my bishop back. I don't want to trade off, because trading makes things simplify in bullet. And sometimes you need to play positionally well so that opponent doesn't trade off everything and struggles on time. Opponent then goes with knight to f3. I play knight to d7. Opponent keeps hunting for the bishop, plays a knight to h4. I improve the position of my bishop now to e7. Opponent takes the bishop. I take back with the h pawn, opening up this h file, which is going to be helpful eventually if the opponent, of course, castles. And in this position, opponent plays a knight to f3, which means the opponent is preparing to castle. I went with queen c7. My idea is even if the knight comes and I take, opponent takes back with the bishop, and then I can take as well. I don't want to lose the control of the e5 square. If my queen is not here, opponent can simply put the knight first and then eventually the bishop, and will have an access to the b8 as well. So opponent finally decides to play d4. Now this is bad because you have shut down your own bishop. You should not have done that, but rather went with go for c4 so that then you can have a c file opened up. Maybe if I am very much not careful, I can lose my queen as well. Opening up the c file makes more sense rather than closing down the diagonal for the bishop. But that's what happens. I went with a6, making sure my structure is more solid. I don't need to do anything. Let opponent do here. Knight comes to e5, and I can trade here, which I did. Opponent takes back, but I don't have a threat because this bishop is still passive. I can simply move my knight back, and now I have two attackers here. So opponent has to do something. Plays f4, right choice. You want to defend the pawn, but then I played knight to c5. Of course, I should have just went for a check first, but my idea was to put my knight around, go on to e4 first, because that's a weakness now because f4 has been played. If f3 was played, then my knight cannot access to the square. But since there is a weakness, I spotted the weakness, and I tried to capture that square. Now queen comes to d2, which allows me, of course, to first castle. I thought before putting my knight in the central square, I should get my rook in the center so that if at all any trade happens, my rook gets opened up in the center too. Opponent plays b4, which only allows me to improve the position of my knight, which anyways was supposed to go to e4, attacking the queen now. The queen is under attack. I have this wonderful diagonal. I am attacking the pawn as well. If just queen loses the control, I can take this and give a check as well. My position looks very strong, and that's why 4.9 in the engine evaluation as well. Now queen comes on to d3. Now I can take this pawn, but then opponent plays pawn forward. So instead, I went with bishop to h4 as a check. And in this position, a very natural looking move, which is g3 is played. But then g3 walks into bishop takes on g3 because opponent cannot take. If takes, I take the rook and I win the other rook as well eventually, or maybe opponent plays the bishop in between. But that's also not helpful much because I will take with the knight as well, and then this point will also be pressured twice. Also have ideas of moving my queen onto e7 and then getting into the action with h4. So a lot of ideas here in this position after the sacrifice. So opponent doesn't take and moves the king onto d1, which is even worse because here comes the mighty fork with the knight, and this fork is very vicious. It is deadly. You lose the queen on the spot. Uh, King keeps moving, keeps getting checked. Now bishop takes on d3. Opponent has lost the queen, and if you see the timestamps here, 33 seconds against 37. So I've done all this, and I've still got 4 seconds extra on the clock. And this is a winning position, and I should be able to convert it. And how to convert it into a winning position? Trade off everything. I took the rook, asking opponent to take. Opponent tries to keep everything on the board to make it complex. But then I maneuver my queen onto b6, which attacks the central pawn too. I have ideas of pushing the pawn as well, just in case. I am okay to give my rook for the bishop too. I don't mind if some trade-off happens here in the center. I lose the rook, opponent lose the bishop, and then I take back with the queen, hitting the rook. My queen will be very strong. I have all the pieces to attack. Opponent plays bishop to c3 here. I take the pawn so that opponent. I thought opponent was planning to put bishop here and then put the bishop backwards, and then suddenly realized, oh no, the opponent will take, and that looks more bad. Of course, this bishop is also going to take the pawn eventually, and it's a nice battery thereafter. So opponent just moved the king away. I still took the pawn on with the bishop on f4. Uh, and now a3 is played just to play a move. Basically nothing much can be done in this position, as you can see. And I took the bishop. I took another pawn here, asking for a bishop trade, which opponent denies and moves the rook onto e1, which is more bad because now the light square bishop is also hanging. If I take the light square bishop, opponent cannot do much. It's a pin on the pawn. But I was, of course, it's a bullet game, so I was playing fast as well. I just took on the bishop, gave a check, trying to simplify. Opponent takes with the king, and now I push the pawn forward to d4, asking opponent to move away. Opponent goes sidestep. Now I put my queen on to d2, trying to give a check maybe, and then opponent moves with the rook onto c1. I give a check, opponent sidesteps, and I pushed now e5. I didn't spot this idea of taking the bishop maybe at that point of time because I was playing fast as well. 3 seconds difference on the clock. Opponent plays rook on to b1. I kept pushing the pawn forward. Opponent now puts the rook onto b3. And in this position, I was like, should I need to save my queen, find a good square for the queen, which is the only square, and then again opponent will be challenging me with some other way, and then there's no continuation I was spotting at that point of time. So I thought, okay, let me quickly exchange. Exchanging is always nice. Opponent takes back with the king, and now I take the bishop as well. Opponent takes back. I have two rooks for a rook, so I'm a whole rook up. I am extra pawns up. This pawn also is extra here if you compare the structure. So I'm completely winning here, not a problem. Put my rook onto h3. Opponent defends with the king onto c4, which allows me to play a b5. And after b5, opponent has got a couple of options: a to go back, a to come up. Opponent chooses to come up, which is bad because now comes king to b7. What king to b7 is played first is to make sure the pawn is saved, and then the idea is to give a checkmate with either of the rooks. And that's what actually happens. Opponent pushes the rook onto e1. So now if I play the rook onto h5, then of course opponent can get in between. So I just give a checkmate from rook to d5. So wonderful checkmate, ending up with the opponent king on c5 in a bullet chess game. And I had my opponent was on three seconds at that point of time. I was at 15, and if you see the Centipawn loss, it was nice. Only couple of inaccuracies, or you can say blunder mistake, whatever it was. It was around the time when I had already got the winning advantage. I couldn't spot the idea of taking on this bishop multiple times, basically. That's what more or less the mistakes and errors were. Rest the game was completely in my favor. Longside castling is a choice to put my rook in the center, which I would always go with rather than improving the position of my piece first. I want to make sure my king is safe, my rook is ready to attack. So everything was nice about this game, and average Centipawn loss of 18 fascinates me. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do subscribe to the channel as well. And I shall see you tomorrow with some interesting and instructive content like always. Thanks for your time. Take care. Bye bye.